I'm Roger Himes, the Gospel Coach, and this is another 5 to 6 minute coaching session. This first series is on the love of God and knowing His love for us. This one, number 4, is after knowing God as God and then as Abba. This leads into knowing Him as Father. Now, as I've said before, Abba denotes an unreasoned expression of trust, love, dependency, and confidence from a child. The word Father denotes a reasoned appreciation, honor, and esteem from a son and daughter. Now, we'll always be both children and sons and daughters. Knowing Father as Abba is where worship is really born. You ever noticed how much little children are drawn to a loving dad? If the dad is really present and really connects with the kids, boy, those kids just adore him. They can't get enough of just being close to him, being with him. This is the way it should be with our loving Abba, between us and him. Now, I want to tell you a brief story about my dog, John Henry. He was so devoted to me, it was almost absurd. If I was in a chair at the computer, he was so close I'd roll over him if I moved. Or watching TV, he'd have his head on my lap, or he'd just lay on my feet. He'd sleep next to me at the bed at night, and if I stirred at night, his face would be right in my face to see if I was awake. My daughters called him Dad's dog and Old Faithful. But John Henry helped give me a spiritual revelation. Johnny, as we sometimes called him, was totally obnoxious and wanting my attention, and he helped teach me more about worshiping Abba than anything else. He'd often just lean against me and lick my hand. I thought about this while doing a Bible study one day. I was studying worship, and one of the definitions of worship really hit me between the eyes. It said, to lick the master's hand. Now, it's a gross thought from a human viewpoint, but from a dog it's really not. Also in this study, in the Greek of the New Testament, the word for worship is the word proskuneo. Now again, one definition says to lick the master's hand. It also means to prostrate yourself in homage and to adore someone. It's a compound word with two parts. One part is pros and one part is kuneo. Well, pros means to give attention to stand in front of someone longingly. It's a verb that means to move upon someone passionately, to strain forward, to even try to force yourself upon someone. It means to demand attention. This sounds just like John Henry, doesn't it? But the other word, the other half of the word is from the Greek word for worship, simply means dog. D-O-G. We get our word canine from it. Yes, part of the word that means worship can be translated dog. Now here's a picture of childlike worship. We wouldn't think about trying to lick God's hand or anyone else's hand, would we? But in reading definitions and illustrations about worship, one was to crawl up on Daddy's lap. Another was to snuggle with him. Another was to lean against someone close as you can get. These were all images of John Henry. Now, John Henry's been dead for about 10 years now, but I still think about him, and I've still got his picture in my study. Do you know our God and Father as Abba? As I've said, we first must come to know Him as God, first of all. He's the supreme and sovereign ruler of the universe. He's the creator of everything that exists, including our never-ending, expanding universe of planets and stars. Some of them are so big that our Earth would be like a small rock on them. But then we should also know Him as Abba. You ever thought about Abba's arm around you as you were walking along? You ever thought about holding hands with Him? You ever thought about crawling up on His lap and snuggling with Him? You know, I have these thoughts. They're not thoughts I have every day, but they are thoughts I have somewhat regularly, and probably not as regularly as Abba would like. I think this last thought of me being on His lap snuggling with Him is the picture I'm going to have in my mind the day I die. At least that's my plan. Many times at night I'll go to sleep thinking, Abba, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. My spirit's in His hands anyway, so why not pray it? Jesus did. But I frequently have visual images of being very close to a loving, intimate relationship with my Abba Father. I know it's very immature, it's very childlike. There are visual images of connecting in ways that are not very adult. I have mental images of just childlike ways of relating, and I sometimes try to copy things that I see some children do as they relate to their daddy. I think Abba kind of smiles at me when I do this. Again, I know it's not very mature adult thinking. We'll get to more mature thinking in the next coaching session. We talk about Father. But after knowing God as God, we must come to know Him as Abba. And if we don't, knowing Him as Father will really escape us in some ways. So really try to just practice having a divine relationship with your Abba as a child does with his. And you just want to hang out with God, having no agenda. Just practice His presence. Don't have any prayers of faith or intercession for others or voicing any desires of things you want Him to do. You know, it may not happen just right away, but as you learn to relate to God at this level, as a child relates to his Abba, getting up on his lap and snuggling with Him, you'll find your relationship with God a lot better, and you'll find knowing who you are as a son or daughter with His Father will come easier too. Hey, I'm Roger Himes, the Gospel Coach, and I want to thank you for listening.